We have taken the big decision. Britain is heading out of the European Union. What now? Welcome to the heart of London, seen by some as the capital of the world. Soon, though, it will no longer be part of the EU. Tonight, in a special programme, we reflect on the big decision you, the voters, have taken. Perhaps the biggest the country has taken for decades. What does the future hold for a UK now leaving the world's biggest club and now looking for a new Prime Minister too? Can the United Kingdom hold together? As Scotland's First Minister says, a second independence referendum is highly likely. On a night when the country radically changed direction, I travelled from north to south, starting in Edinburgh, across urban and rural Britain, as the country turned its back on the EU and on David Cameron.
I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
Who comes next? Rachel Burden profiles the lifelong rivalry between David Cameron and his likely successor, Boris Johnson. What next for the Polish builder planning to make his way to the UK? Matthew Price is in Warsaw. Elaine Dunkley is with young people in Birmingham, a generation that voted to remain in a city that voted to leave.
We're one of the youngest cities in Europe generationally in terms of how many young people are here. And I was just upset, really, that we didn't come out in the droves of us that are actually living here to say that, as the stats show, most of us want to remain.
And drawing the first line of history, the cartoonist Gerald Scarfe is with us to show his take on Brexit. So the big decision has been taken, but only just. In keeping with what many saw as a brutal, a depressing campaign, the result reveals a divided United Kingdom. Leave won with 51.9% voting to get out of the EU. It was a victory won primarily in England, where 53.4% voted to leave, but also in Wales, where 52.5% voted to leave. In Scotland, meanwhile, there was a big majority to remain, 62%, as there was in Northern Ireland, 55.8% back remain then. We'll be reporting from there later. The country is split, a division absolutely clear to me as I travelled the length and breadth of it, starting in Edinburgh at around this time last night. Perhaps few of us realised it, but as we voted yesterday, we were juggling with fire. Our vote's not just about what was on the ballot paper, but also the unity of our country and who'll govern us from now on. The theory was that this referendum would resolve something, would settle a question. One thing it has settled is the divisions in Britain. Divisions between one nation, here I am in Scotland, and the rest of the country. Divisions between generations. Divisions between rich and poor. Will it settle anything? Who on earth knows? And are you worried that Scotland may vote one way and the rest of the UK vote another?
I'm more than worried, convinced.
So I was hovering even in the box.
What, with a pencil?
Yes.
Going leave,
Yep.
remain?
Yep.
Edinburgh's the most pro-EU city in the most pro-EU country. Over the border is where the anti-Europe revolt began. The border between Scotland and England is not just the border between two nations, it's a border between two hugely different attitudes to our membership of the EU, just one of the many divisions that have been exposed in this referendum. The first city to declare, the first tremor to signal the earthquake to come, was Newcastle. I headed to a polling station as it prepared to close. So you just voted?
Yes, I have. I voted to leave.
You're from Cyprus?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you scared
No,
that Britain might leave?
no, I might just go back home, I guess.
Well, you go home if the UK left Europe?
Yeah, I guess.
All right. It's been nice having you here. You got a minute by my count. In you go. How did you vote?
Remain.
No doubts?
No doubts.
Because?
I don't know. Sorry.
No idea. So this is it. The door is now closing. That is it. No more votes. Polling is over. Britain's destiny hangs in the balance.
So Big Ben has struck 10 o'clock, and we can now start trying to discover which side thinks has carried the day.
The CBI are having their northeast dinner tonight. Polls have just closed. Let's see how nervy the businessmen are. Polling has just closed. Is this a nervous occasion?
It's been a very, very nervous occasion, and I think, you know, business leaders here are very conscious that there's been so much on hold.
I'm relatively relaxed. I just don't contemplate that the answer can't be Remain.
I export all over the world, and I don't give a flying hoot about it all. I think we should be independent out of it all and get on with it.
Newcastle voted to remain just, but down the road in Sunderland came the sign that Britain was heading for the exit. It is just before midnight. The conventional wisdom down south in London is that Remain have just edged it. That's what they're saying in the financial markets. That's what the private polls are saying. That's what both sides privately are saying. But until these votes are counted up and announced here in the northeast, frankly, no one really knows.
The total number of votes cast in favour of leave was 82,000.
They are celebrating because that is over 60%. Sunderland, the first place in the country to vote leave, and to vote leave by a much, much bigger margin than anybody expected. Why people here say there are people who voted who haven't voted since Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister.
And it's the working man who said no. The working man.
Have they said no to Europe, or are they basically saying no to the guys running the country?
I think
both.
It's a bit of both.
Both.
I think the time has come when people have said, look, we've had enough of big government, big business, telling us what's good for us.
We have been an island race for hundreds of years. Germany has tried twice to rule Europe. This is the third time, and people have had enough. Why should we be dictated to by the likes of Germany and Juncker and what have you?
Just in the last few minutes, we've seen the pound fall to levels not seen since 2009 here.
For those still awake in the middle of the night, the mood was beginning to change. The markets abroad starting to panic. Leave starting to believe they could win. How did you vote?
I voted leave.
I voted to leave as well.
I voted to leave.
And I voted to leave.
So you're feeling pretty good?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Did you actually believe for a second that your side might win?
Yes.
You did?
I did.
Because?
Because the only reason I could see that the reason for staying was that we don't know what will happen if we go out, and that's not a good enough reason for not making that decision.
I do think that we've got a chance to make Britain again. And I think that I really believe that now is the time to take the opportunity.
I'm going to be cheeky, Dennis. I don't know what that means. What does Britain
Well,
mean?
Britain to be a self-governing country with laws and rules and regulations and a parliament that actually looks after what we're doing.
The birds are singing, dawn over Leeds. I've just had a text message from a very senior Remain figure who is effectively conceding defeat. Nigel Farage is claiming victory in their students, representative of the many, many young people who've campaigned for Remain. The question is, do they accept they've lost? You still believing?
I think we'll be okay.
You think you're going to be okay?
Hopefully.
I think it's going to go right down to the wire. I just don't know.
If it goes leave, how are you going to feel?
Devastated.
We will be gutted and a bit.
You'll be gutted?
Yeah, and nervous for most of us are graduating in 2 weeks, so it's kind of a worrying horizon. We're supposed to be entering the job market, but
it's scary.
It is scary.
It's 7:30. It is the morning after the night before. Anybody who went to bed at a normal time thought they were going to bed with Britain staying in the EU. Now, waking up, coming here, having their breakfast, they discover the news: we are leaving the EU, and it changes just about everything. The question is, how will Britain feel? It's a big morning.
First English breakfast in England.
Say that again.
First English breakfast in England now.
Feeling good then?
Very.
Really?
Yeah, I am, yeah.
Why such a...
We get our country back today. It's Independence Day.
Out.
Fuera?
Out.
Out?
Yeah.
No.
Out. Gone.
No possible.
No, it's possible. UK, no more Europe.
No good, no bueno.
Not good, no bueno.
No bueno.
The result now clear, so too was the fear beginning to spread amongst those who desperately wanted us to remain in the EU, including this farmer I met in Peterborough with his daughter.
I'm just afraid that it could even result in violence.
What, here in Britain or between countries in Europe?
Countries in Europe, and I wouldn't want anyone to have to go and fight, and I wouldn't want any bloodshed.
To actually break up the European Union, break up potentially the United Kingdom, it does fill me with quite some dread.
In fact, the Prime Minister, you may want to see it yourself, is going to be talking in 5 minutes' time from Downing Street.
He's not going to resign, is he?
I think he'll be gone within weeks. Events would soon start to move a whole lot faster.
I think the country requires fresh leadership to take it in this direction.
As the Prime Minister walked onto Downing Street, we headed back to London. So David Cameron has quit. People said he wouldn't have to if he lost, but he felt he needed to. Why, you might be wondering? The reasons are clear. This was a referendum he didn't need to have. It was a referendum of his choosing, on a date that he picked, on turf which he selected, and he lost. And that's why he feels he has to go. By now the pound had crashed, stocks too, the markets were in panic. I landed in what already felt like a different country, not just because so much had changed in such a short time, but because London, which voted overwhelmingly for Remain, has more in common with Edinburgh than anywhere in between. It is now 10:30. Here, of course, we are in London, and that red tall tower, Westminster Tower, is the new centre of power in this country. It's the headquarters of Vote Leave. Boris Johnson, Michael Gove will meet there. They will appear in front of the media. They are the men who will shape the direction this country now takes. Take back control, one of the most powerful slogans in the history of politics. And control is precisely what they now have. Let's examine some of the consequences of this extraordinary day. With me in the studio, Stephanie Flanders of JP Morgan Asset Management. Down in Westminster, our Deputy Political Editor, John Pienaar. And in Edinburgh, our Scotland Editor, Sarah Smith. Stephanie, first to you. You know, there'll be people watching tonight who are worried about their own financial situation, be concerned about their savings, about their pensions, about their job. How worried should they be?
This has been a hit to the economy. We think there is going to be a hit to confidence, hit to investment. That means slower job growth in the next few months and probably in the next couple of years. It means there'll be less investment and that kind of activity. We don't think at the moment that it's going to push the economy into recession, but the economy had already slowed down quite a lot. And we know the Bank of England is going to be watching very closely to think how is this affecting not just the financial markets, but real economic activity out there. And if they see a real risk, I think they might actually do a bit more to have a further cut in interest rates. So I guess one implication is if you were hoping to have higher interest rates on your savings, earnings on your savings in the next year or so, that's much less likely to happen, but equally a mortgage rate rise is less likely to happen. What we will see is higher inflation. That fall in the pound, that means import prices are going to be higher. So inflation could be 3 or 4% next year, not 1 or 2.
But somebody watched today and got very nervy as the market seemed to plummet at one point. I think, well, look, they bounced back quite a long time. The stock exchange, the so-called FTSE that measures it, was down 7%, went up to, a fall of about 2% in the end. So maybe it'll all be fine.
Yeah, and I think, you were talking about the middle of the night where we had that sort of plunge in sterling. I mean, it was really brought about because there'd been this rather odd rally in the markets in the last week for no good reason, I think.
Well, as
people
they
in the
Remain would win.
markets had decided that Remain would win, despite the fact that the polls still seemed to be pretty close. There had been this kind of certainty that had overtaken the markets and had pushed them up everywhere. So when you came down, it seemed very dramatic, but actually the FTSE's higher now than it was in February when Boris Johnson announced he was coming out.
Now, behind me is the City of London. You now work in the City of London. Of course, the City of London is not just creating jobs here in this city, it creates jobs right across the UK. Some companies have warned, JP Morgan, for example, of very, very big job losses in the thousands as business has to be moved to the EU. Is that going to happen, or are banks now just going to wait and see?
Look, I think they won't just wait and see, but it's somewhere in between those. I mean, the Leave side always said, look, the next day nothing will change. And that's true, but every finance director, every big multinational, not just banks, has been on the phone today with their to other people in the company saying, what are our trading relationships, what are our customer relationships with the UK, other parts of Europe, how is it going to affect them? In the case of banks, there are bits of their business that could be very affected, and they won't be able to wait around to see how this deal goes. Nothing will happen immediately, but parts of that business will go, and probably go long before these negotiations start.
Big lesson of this day: money waits for no one, politics waits for no one. Let's turn to our deputy political editor, John Pienaar in Westminster. John, we've just had this extraordinary democratic experiment, but we are now going to see the Tory membership, not the public, not members of Parliament, choose our next Prime Minister, and within weeks.
Yes, and I think it is all sorts of open questions as to where we go with all of this. They will have to have, and they will have, a new leader, because David Cameron's authority was shot through. They need a leader who can sit down at conference tables with some conviction and be believed when he says it's possible to drive a successful bargain on behalf of Britain. But the new leader will start with an entirely new programme to get through Parliament, which still has a small majority for the Conservative Party, a dangerously small majority, and a country waiting to see what on earth is in store from their new look Brexit government, which is why the possibility of an early general election is a real and open question.
And is it a sure bet that that next leader will be Boris Johnson?
He's going to take an awful lot of stopping. Boris Johnson's popularity out in the country with the party at large, that pretty much goes without saying. You see it almost wherever he goes. He doesn't have quite the same kind of devoted following at Westminster. Boris Johnson is someone who can work a hall of 5,000 people. He's less assiduous, or has been, about working a room of MPs with 20 in them. Less by way of pressing the flesh in the tea room, less by way of lunch and dinner parties and a kind word for everyone. He's been a bit neglectful about all that. Still, Tory MPs see that he is the front runner. For that reason, he will attract support. Question mark, in the weeks and months between now and the selection of a new leader, will Boris's weaknesses, such as they are, be exposed and undermine his claim to the top job? And add to that the past record that so often in the past over history, the dark horse, the one you don't put first in the running when the contest starts, that's the one who comes through in the end.
Thank you, John. Certainly no rest for you after the referendum. In Edinburgh, our Scotland editor, Sarah Smith, is also going to be busy. Now, the First Minister, Sarah, made clear that it was on the table, the possibility of a second referendum on Scottish independence. What does that mean? Is it going to happen, and if so, how soon?
Well, we asked her that directly, and she said she thought it was highly likely. Now, that's different from saying she is definitely going to do it. Instead, she's been inserting her right to hold a second referendum if she wants to, saying that this Brexit is a material change from the circumstances in which Scotland voted in 2014 against becoming an independent country. So she thinks she could hold a referendum. Will she? Well, that entirely depends on whether or not she thinks she can win it. Nobody really knows at this point whether 62% of Scotland voting to stay in the EU would translate into something like 60% of Scots voting to leave the UK. And until she has some evidence as to whether or not this has increased support for independence, she's not going to risk calling an independence referendum.
Sarah Smith, thank you very much indeed. Now, as we've been hearing, the referendum has divided Britain. It's divided the government. It's now brought David Cameron's premiership to an early end. From the moment the former London Mayor Boris Johnson backed Leave, this became a battle not just over EU membership, but also for the keys of number 10. As Rachel Burden now reports, it's a battle that dates back to those playing fields of Eton.
Right, we're taking back control.
Britain is on the right track.
Two men born into privilege, educated among the elite, political careers converging, but torn apart by Europe. Both men were schooled at Eton, the natural choice for a posh boy like David Cameron, but it was brains that won Boris Johnson his place. He was a scholarship pupil and rapidly became a kind of celebrity. David Cameron, on the other hand, didn't have quite the same impact. Former pupils and teachers here remember Boris Johnson as an extraordinary pupil with formidable wit, full of personality and popular right across the school. Even then he was known simply as Boris. David Cameron, by contrast, is described as clever, decent, hard-working, but with none of the star quality of his fellow students. After Eton, Oxford. Where else? Both men joined the Bullingdon Club, a drinking society for upper-class toffs. But that notorious picture of them together is perhaps misleading. In fact, their paths at university were rather different. Boris continued to push his own personal brand, running successfully for president of the Oxford Union, a sort of mini House of Commons.
Honourable members wishing to vote in favour of the motion will occupy the benches on my right.
Just like at Eton, Boris was well known throughout the university and had what one contemporary described as a truly remarkable personal political franchise. David Cameron, by contrast, despite studying politics and working hard enough to earn himself a first, did not play any active part in student political life. James Dellingpole socialised with David Cameron, but says it was Boris who had a clear sense of his own destiny.
He knew from the start that he wanted a career in politics, and which is why he was very keen to become president of the Oxford Union, as he did. He was a flamboyant character, but he was very much a political figure. Dave, complete opposite. He couldn't have been less interested in student politics. He probably thought it was rather beneath him.
Both men carried the characteristics of their early lives through their political careers. Boris Johnson, the scruffy genius with his gift for the gaff. David Cameron, the model professional, managerial, pragmatic, a moderniser and a family man. What are his political convictions?
He believes that his role is to keep the show on the road, number one, and number two, to improve life for people incrementally, step by step. He's very suspicious of people that have grand ideals.
We see, I struggle to find much ideology at all with Boris. I mean, he's changed his mind clearly about the EU several times. When I worked with him, we reported on the EU together. In private, he'd be sympathetic. In public, he'd write the most excoriating pieces about the EU. There is no ideology, which is why it's quite difficult to tell what kind of Prime Minister he would be.
Soon this place will be vacant as another Tory leader falls victim to an old argument. Europe is the sword that has split these parallel political lives, even though both men have been accused of inconsistency and opportunism on the whole question throughout their careers. Now the British people have had their say. So is this a final chance for Boris to catch up with his rival and complete the last leg of that journey from Eton to Oxford to number 10?
Many spoke of this referendum as if it would settle something. Of course, what it's done is unsettled just about everything. With me to discuss that, Ian Duncan-Smith, a prominent campaigner for Leave, the former Work and Pension Secretary. And just before we talk to Ian, let's go over to Gerald Scarfe. Gerald, you're making some progress on your cartoon.
Well, I'm working on one of my favourites here, Farage. I mean, he's wonderful, wonderful material. And he's got Cameron in a glass of beer and he's saying, bottoms up.
No one would have believed a while back, would they, that Farage would be the victor?
Absolutely.
Cameron.
I mean, in a way, I don't want to lose him, of course, because he's very good material.
You want to keep him there?
Yes, I'm always for keeping the bad ones in there. They're the best material.
You've got a few more weeks. Ian Duncan-Smith, welcome to the programme. Thank you for joining us. First of all, on this Tory leadership, let's remember, it's no longer a bit of gossip about who might replace your party leader. This is about who has power in this country within weeks, who is the next Prime Minister of this country. Is Boris Johnson up to the job?
If you're asking me, do I think he personally has the attributes and has he displayed those? I think in the course of the campaign, a number of questions that people like you were asking about. Does he have the ability to focus? Can he conduct debates? Can he be cross-examined? I think you saw during the course of that he did meet those challenges, and therefore the answer to that question is, I think yes. Is he going to be the only one that can meet those challenges? Absolutely not. There will be others who will step forward.
I sense he's not quite your man. There may be others.
No, having been leader, I have to tell you, I wish them the best of luck because, you know, I have the T-shirt and the knife stab wounds and everything else, and I just simply say, you know, I'm taking a pace back because for me, this is all about where do we go next as a country, and I'm peculiarly less interested in the leadership end of this altogether.
People watching at home may think we've had this fantastic exercise in democracy whether they love the result or loathe the result, and yet the next Prime Minister of our country will be chosen purely by whether you pay a Conservative membership fee. Does that make you feel a bit uncomfortable?
Well, I mean, you know as well as I do that a parliamentary democracy means that you elect a body of people to form your government. So in other words, a party gets elected and whoever they choose to be their leader becomes the Prime Minister. And that is really what the democracy is about.
There's a bunch of Tory activists will decide who the next occupant of Tory
Well, you know, it used to be just a bunch of Conservative MPs. Now it's a little bit wider and it goes out wide. So my sense about this is that it needs explaining to the public, but you're right about the democracy bit. Yesterday was startling, it was fascinating, and I think we learned quite a lot, and there's a lot more to learn about what the British public thinks about us.
Well, there's also something to learn, isn't there, about the process, because people might imagine they voted to get out, therefore we are out. We are not out of the European Union, are we? There's quite a lot of steps, and quite a few years to go before we're actually extricated.
Well, it depends very much how, of course, you do it. There are a number of different ways that you can approach this.
Cameron's put it on hold, sorry to interrupt, but Cameron has basically said, I'm not going to get us out of the EU, I'm going to leave it to the next Prime Minister. So it's already on hold for a number of months.
I think there are things we can get on with immediately. I think, for example, whatever the process that we go through, we need to start defining that. I think it's important for us to bring together a cross-party group of people and some experts from outside, you know, legal experts and experts from business, etc., to be able to pull together a team that actually says, look, this is the best process for us, and by the way, these are the best prospects for us. And at least we can get going with that now, notwithstanding the fact there's a leadership election on. I think that process should begin, and I very much want to help make that happen.
And yet there will be people in the House of Commons, there will be people in the House of Lords who say, there is no majority in this place, Parliament, for getting out. We want to do as much as we can to make this as difficult as we can. And you know what? We'll get our inspiration from Ian Duncan Smith, because he made life hell for John Major when he disagreed with him on Europe. So we're going to do it now. We'll rebel, we'll cause trouble.
Up to them, really. I mean, you know, like anything else, they had a referendum. It was arguably the biggest vote that we've had in this country in terms of a single question. I like to think, and the Prime Minister said this originally, that this is not an advisory referendum. It was an absolute decision by the British people, a 4%, you know, over 1.5 million votes. So all I would say to colleagues in the House of Commons, of course, that's their decision. You know, they're free to do what they like. But I would say to them, the decision was to leave the European Union. The question is, now what does that look like? And we have to present that to the public.
One last question. Do you worry that expectations are simply too high? There's this uncomfortable figure, 350 million, which most people now accept was never true. That amount of money was never sent to the EU. There's an expectation immigration will come down. The truth is it won't come down anytime soon, however quickly you get us out of the EU. Do you worry that this air of rebellion we've seen may actually get worse when people say, well, what's happened? Nothing's actually got any better.
Well, no, because I actually think the main point now is the British public have asked us to do something. They've said, rather than asked, they've told us that they have made a decision. And I think it's incumbent on politicians here at Westminster to recognise two factors. First of all, the election process yesterday turned up something really, really quite startling and important for us, beyond even the EU referendum point. What has happened is, I think, that British politics has become incredibly distant from the people it's meant to work for and govern. And I've said this for some time. And what we saw, for example, on the housing estates yesterday, we had 80% turnouts in housing estates. Even when a Labour government was elected, we have never seen figures like that.
But briefly, if you don't deliver what they want, which is a big cut in immigration,
but that is,
they'll come for you,
well,
just
my
like
point
they came
is,
for David
you have
Cameron.
to deliver the terms of our departure from the EU, and on that, everything else hinges. The who governs issue is the key to migration, it's the key to money, and it's the key to the future of your economy. And I think that's the critical bit. So if they try and delay it too long, that's exactly what they'll provoke. So we need to get on with it.
Ian Duncan Smith, thank you very much indeed. Join us down the line from Westminster, Anna Soubry, the business minister, a Conservative, prominent Remain supporter as well. Anna Soubry, I need to begin by asking you that question you're never supposed to ask in my job. How does it feel? I suspect you are gutted by this outcome.
Oh, yeah. I think it's a very, very sad day, not only because of the result, but also because the resignation of my Prime Minister. I'm a big fan of David Cameron. He's not somebody I know, I have to say. I don't share kitchen suppers with him. He's somebody I've got to know and, most importantly, got to admire. And I think we are very, very much the poorer in our country for him resigning. But it's a bad day, and there are a lot of people contacting me, my daughters, their friends, to say that as a generation they feel that their future has been somewhat disturbed, if not stolen, by an older generation. And I think we have to say that there are a lot of people very upset today, especially younger people.
And do you fight on, or do you have to simply say, we fought, we lost, we have to accept the verdict? Absolutely. Or is there a fight for some sort of European role for Britain that you want to pursue?
No, look, you've got to, obviously I accept the result, I respect the wishes of the people, and now we have to move on. We have, of course, and Mark Carney's done a grand job as the Governor of the Bank of England by stabilising the markets. There's more to be done, obviously, to put the confidence back for British business. But also there's a huge healing process that now needs to take part in our country. Do forgive me, Nick, but you know, I've stayed tonight because I'd much rather be at home. I'd much rather be back in my constituency where there's a tribute at 6:30 for Joe Cox in my constituency in Beeston. And one of the problems is that the debate in politics, including this referendum debate, has been too London-centric. I mean, people need to get out, forgive me, the media, out of London and listen to what people are thinking and saying. And if that had happened, and that's where I was during all of this, I foresaw much of this, and now I have experienced a situation in our country which I haven't seen since the 70s when I was a student in Birmingham and then in Hackney. People saying things, people talking about race, talking about immigrants in a derogatory way, which I've not seen for 40 years, and we've got to stop preying on prejudice and fueling fear, and that's what's happened. And now we've got to put back that great value of Britishness, which is tolerance, and that must be achieved by all politicians coming together and working in that much, much, much bigger, greater good.
Well, could Boris Johnson be the man to do that? Or do you need to find someone else because you actually think he is guilty of playing the immigration card?
It's not one person.
It is one person who becomes Prime Minister. There's only one person who will have power in this country within weeks.
But you know
Anna Soubry, and you're a prominent Conservative, so is he up to the job?
You know what, Nick, I'm absolutely not interested anymore at this stage in talking about personalities. That's what bedeviled this EU debate, was that it became about personalities, and it was, you know, who got the star rating here and who was going for the leadership by taking a slug out of my Prime Minister there. And that's one of the reasons why we've lost the debate, because we never had the real debate, which was about the issues. It was about the future of our nation, what we wanted us to be, and why, from my point of view, it was so important we remained and continued to change the European Union. That debate never really took place. It became a debate about immigration, and that's not been our finest hour. And now we need to put it behind us, we need to move forward, and we have to unite communities. I can't tell you some of the things that I have seen in the last few weeks, names that have been shouted out to me, called a traitor, and worse than that, people saying, these immigrants, get these immigrants out. We've got to make the case for immigration. That hasn't been done. Sorry?
You sound like a woman who is rather frightened about the divisions that have opened up in our society.
Sorry, Nick, you broke up. I'm so sorry. Say that again.
You sound, not at all. You sound like a woman who's frightened by the divisions that have opened up in society.
Am I frightened by the divisions, did you say? Yes, I am.
Yes.
Very, very, very concerned about it. But we can heal it, because we've done it in the past. And we now need to see, as I say, we need a positive case to be made now for immigration. I mean, if you tell people for decades, as politicians have, not me, I might say, that, you know, there's something bad about migration, they will vote in the way they have. We need to make a positive case for the great contribution immigrants have made to our society, our economy, and to our culture.
Anna Soubry, thank you for your time. You're watching The Big Decision with Nick Robinson, a special programme on the vote to leave the European Union. Vote Leave won that referendum with 51.9% of the vote. England and Wales voted to leave, Scotland and Northern Ireland to remain. The Prime Minister will leave office later this year. He said that someone else needs to lead the negotiations over Brexit. And still to come, Fergal Keane is in Northern Ireland, reporting from what will soon be the UK's only land border with the European Union. Well, both sides were agreed on one thing: there is no going back from this vote. And that will affect one group of people perhaps more than any other, the young, who will now plan and live their lives as British citizens outside the EU. Now, according to the pollsters YouGov, 75%, 3/4 of 18 to 24-year-olds voted to remain. Elaine Dunkley's been to Birmingham, a city that voted to leave, to talk to a generation that voted overwhelmingly to remain.
Birmingham, a city which has the youngest population in Europe. 40% of people here are under the age of 25. The referendum, a chance to shape their vision of the future. Democracy has decided that their future is best served outside of the European Union. Were you surprised that Birmingham voted to leave the European Union?
Yeah, really surprised. That's the saddest part of the whole thing. Like you look at the whole country and you go, wow, okay, today it's a massive decision. It's the biggest decision we'll ever make. But however, my city, where I call home, where I've called home for the last 23 years, has voted majority leave. That's a bigger problem.
I was just upset, really, that we didn't come out in the droves of us that are actually living here to say that, as the stats show, most of us want to remain.
Me personally, I'm in the middle, and I think personally the decision that's been made is been rushed.
I've voted leave because A, sovereignty, but B, I think there is public service issues as well. I think it's going to be a case of short-term pain for long-term gain.
I run a business, and my head was conflicted. I voted my heart, I voted Remain because I felt that actually was the best thing for the economy, and I thought it was the best thing for the country. But actually there are legit arguments to leave, and for the economy, for example, you know, this allows us to freely trade with China, with India, these huge markets.
Rihanna, do you fear for your future job prospects?
I think that it's got grave consequences, and I also worry about prospects of buying a home and the interest rates and everything else that goes along with it. It affects every single aspect of our lives.
Kelly, you voted out of the European Union. What were your reasons for that, and how do you feel having made that decision?
I personally think that it will give us so much more control, and it will also decrease the chances of terrorist attacks, and we don't know who's coming in, and we don't know who they are.
The point about the terrorist attack, a lot of terrorists are homegrown terrorists, so I don't know what we're going to close from them. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, like this gentleman said, our forefathers, we are immigrants. Birmingham's multicultural, we're diverse, and same as he said, it's a surprise that we didn't vote. Everyone voted on Facebook, but no one seemed to vote where it mattered. And that was a fact of it, do you know what I mean?
Alexandra, you're from Poland, so you couldn't vote, but you've been here for 9 years. How do you feel? Because a lot of this discussion has been about people like yourself from Eastern Europe.
Yeah, I feel unwelcome to an extent, which is shocking because I've never felt that before. A few months ago, it started to be really awkward to say that I'm Polish. It started to be really uncomfortable. And it's not just my experience, it's also the experience from my other friends.
I think we're talking about immigration quite a lot, but with our age demographic, I don't think that's an influence. We live with people who, we are multicultural people. So with us, it's mainly about our future. Nobody's talking about our future. Nobody did. It was mainly about the issues we've got now and how they want to resolve them.
Well, look, this idea of we don't know what's going to happen, this goes back to what we were saying earlier about we wanted more information, was it done too quickly, all this kind of stuff. And what we have to remember, and something that I think maybe we're forgetting, is we live in a democracy. Would you prefer to live in a different society?
The list of questions about the future is long for young Britons. Brexit will be a brave new world for a generation that has always been part of the EU.
Now, if one issue has decided the result of this referendum, it is surely immigration. So claimed UKIP leader Nigel Farage in his moment of triumph this morning. The Remain campaign, he suggested, was unable to come up with an answer for voters unhappy with the freedom of movement, a freedom which has seen millions of EU migrants, many of them from Poland, move here since joining the EU. Our correspondent Matthew Price reports now from Warsaw to see what the Polish builder will do now.
There was little today, here on the other side of the water, to suggest that change of such a seismic nature had come. It was a day for relaxing in the intense heat, and yet...
Goodbye, Wielka Brytania.
Goodbye, Great Britain was the news on the radio in the workshops. Among the hundreds of thousands working in the UK is Igor Basai, in construction, 62 years old. He heads back to London with his team for another job this weekend.
Do you think this vote changes anything for Polish workers?
Yes, it will change many Polish workers, but many of them will stay in England because they have good qualified, they make good work for England. Not for them, not for their chiefs, but for England. You need good qualified workers.
For Eastern Europe, released in 1989 from the shackles of half a century of Soviet rule, joining the EU was seen as the moment when they finally entered the European family. And they benefited, with freedom of movement to work across the Union. With so many Poles living in the United Kingdom, this nation arguably has more to lose than any other because of Britain's decision to leave the European Union. It's a decision which has implications for the whole of the EU, implications about the bloc's future direction, indeed about its very survival. And it's a decision that marks the start of a process which could well make it far more difficult for people from countries like this to come to Britain to live and to work. What now then for Renata Hrzeńczuk and her son? A nurse, 32 years old. She wanted to move her family to Britain. She already has a job lined up in a private hospital.
I think it's a disaster. I have so many doubts right now. The main thing is my son. Yes, we are going there for him, only for him. Yes, to provide him better future, better opportunities for the future. And now I'm worried because he's a Polish and maybe somebody will not like him.
And take a peek now at Dominika Kolczot's timeline. The non-British EU friends that she made when she worked in the UK are all worried, as is Dominika herself, a businesswoman now based here.
I'm really surprised. I somehow didn't want to believe this will happen. And yes, I do feel sorry for all the Poles, because I think for them it's a bit of a, like this time they are actually not really welcomed.
The referendum campaign itself established few certainties. Now the uncertainties unleashed by the decision to leave have spread across the EU, spread right to its eastern borders. Matthew Price, BBC News, Poland.
With me now, Daniel Hannan, who's perhaps been the most prominent Conservative member of the European Parliament to argue for years that Britain should leave the EU. Alongside him, Ed Balls, of course, Labour's former Shadow Chancellor and a close advisor to Gordon Brown when he was in the Treasury. Evening to both of you. Do you agree, Ed Balls, even though you don't agree with him on the outcome, do you agree with Nigel Farage? It was immigration what done it. It was people's anxiety that led them to vote to get out.
I think the immigration issue was not faced up to in the campaign or before, and I think that was a real problem, and in the end I think it was very important in deciding the result. But I think these issues go back not just to this campaign but 5-10 years. Globalisation has been happening to a country like ours. We had a huge financial crisis, we've had a real squeeze on wages because people have found it hard to get good jobs, and then we've seen migration in Europe but also in other countries as well, on a scale that none of us anticipated. And I think the reality is that we didn't face up to that as a political class. We didn't understand that when people said they wanted control, it wasn't they were saying close the borders, but they wanted it to be managed, and it wasn't managed properly enough, and that is in the end a great failing.
Now, Dan Hannan, the danger for you, now you've won, and I don't want to spoil your big day, you're celebrating.
It's a big day for me. I've been building up to this for 26 years.
Yes, but there is a danger, isn't there, that people might think, aha, we're out now, immigration will come down now, we're going to be happier now because our wages will go up to... That's not how it's going to be, is it?
No, it's not. And I've learnt in politics that people are not like 3-year-olds, and people understand that there isn't going to be anything immediate and radical. First of all, nothing changes until Brexit comes into effect. But
which
even
could be a
then,
couple of years away.
which could be 2 years, 3 years, I mean, who knows, right? But even then, the day that we formally leave looks just like the day before. That's the day that the divergence can begin. So the day we leave, all of our technical standards that we've been assimilating for 43 years, they're all still there. That's the day we can begin to disapply them. Our trade relations are all in place. That's the day that one side or the other can begin to diverge.
Now, there isn't just that delay, Ed Balls, is there? There isn't just the fact that it takes time to sort of, as it were, unravel things. If you were back in your old job at the Treasury, people would be saying to you from business, we need migrants. We need them to run the businesses around here.
I think the reality is now, for the government, this is a very, very difficult task that they face over the next 2 years, to try and get a deal which is a good deal for Britain, and it's going to require all parties to be part of that. The reality is that if we leave, and we're now going to leave, well, on what terms? And in particular, that access to the single market. Now, I've always believed that we need to move away from free movement, but at the moment, if we go for a Norway-type deal or for Switzerland, where we have access to the single market, at the moment, that will be on the basis of free movement. Now, I don't think that's going to be acceptable after this campaign. So what kind of deal can actually be struck?
I just want to apologise to people. If you're having a slightly strange effect on the sound, we are here too, so my apologies. But bear with us if you would. Dan Hannan, if you switched off all EU immigration like that now, net migration would still be massively over the government's target because we allow so many people in from outside Europe.
That's true, although those numbers have fallen very, very... Well, I'm not sure that's right. I keep hearing this thing about built-up expectations. We've never said that there is going to be some radical decline, that we're going to shut the door, let alone that the status of anyone already here is going to be affected. I mean, that's completely off the table.
You think the people who voted yesterday thought, actually, immigration won't really change?
No, what they wanted was control. What they wanted was some sense that ultimately we are in charge of roughly who comes in and roughly in what numbers.
That's a theoretical concept, you're saying they wanted.
Forgive me,
what they wanted was a cut.
Listen, I have been on that campaign trail longer than almost anyone. I've been making this speech to audiences all over, and at every one I say, look, if you think that anyone's going to, if you think we're going to be getting rid of Polish barmaids or airlifting pensioners from the costas, forget it. And people understand that. They are mature voters.
To be fair, I'm sure Dan's been saying that, but other members of the Leave campaign have been saying the opposite. And it's been a nasty, divisive campaign, partly because it's been very much an anti-outside world, anti-immigrant campaign. I think Dan is right. People want it to be managed. They don't want to shut the borders, but the promises made in this campaign by the Out campaign have been, we're going to put more money in the NHS, we're going to bring migration down radically, we're going to keep the benefits of being part of the global economy while being outside the EU. They've got to deliver, and it's going to be very, very hard indeed.
That
is not what people heard.
And it'll take, even that will take time. I don't want to build up expectations, but that will happen.
You're still relatively young, both of you, but you are veterans of this. Is it over? In other words, do you think, Ed Balls, it is possible in the EU in a manifesto? Do you, Dan Hannan, believe this is it for a generation?
Well, I think this is it, but I also think that there is a responsibility on us as the winning side to recognise that it was a very narrow margin. 48% of people voted to remain, including 2 of the 4 constituent nations of the UK. We can't just pretend that that didn't happen. So we need to try and carry as many people as possible with us. We need to listen to the concerns of the Remain voters. And that means that quite a lot of the things we're doing are going to remain in place. There will be a phased repatriation of power, but it's not going to be precipitate, it's not going to be sudden, and it will be done wherever possible with the agreement of our allies.
I think the magnitude of this decision is going to sink in over the next few months. It's been decided, but it may well be that in the coming weeks, our European partners will come along and say, well, actually, for Britain, we will give you restrictions on free movement. Unfortunately, it's going to be too late, and I don't think the British people are going to be in a mood to change their mind.
Ed Balls, Dan Hannan, thank you for joining us. Well, we've already covered a huge range of important issues, but Northern Ireland is another. The province voted to stay in the EU, but the decision taken by the rest of the UK raises the question of whether border controls will have to return between the north and the Republic of Ireland in the south, which of course is still and will still be part of the European Union even after we leave. That would inevitably stir memories of the Troubles when security checks were the norm. Sinn Féin today demanded a referendum for North and South to come together as a united Ireland. Fergal Keane now reports from what will become the UK's land border with the European Union.
The army used to call this bandit country the borderlands of South Armagh. When I reported here during the Troubles, it was a place of blocked roads.
Yeah, you can't come down this way. No, the road's closed.
Of ambushes and watchtowers. But political compromise and EU money helped to change the landscape. The guns vanished, the security bases closed. Thanks to the peace process, the physical manifestations, the huge security presence along the border is no longer necessary. But because of Brexit, the Irish Republic now becomes this country's land border with Europe, with unknown political and economic implications. The Republican dead are still invoked to support Sinn Féin's campaign for a united Ireland. And today the party seized on the Brexit vote to say the time had come for a border referendum. Roisin Mulgrew is a local politician and businesswoman.
Here we have always felt that as a 32-county Ireland, we are stronger. We can attract investors, and people need to sit down and really look at.
So it's an economic rather than a nationalist argument?
It's both.
Close to the border, Protestant farmer Roy Harper has bitter memories of the Troubles. 10 of his neighbours were killed in a sectarian massacre nearby. Prosperity and peace should have made him a natural Remain voter, but he's celebrating, glad to be rid of red tape, he says.
We're told there's going to be a lot of money available because we're not sending it into the EU coffers. But I don't think the Troubles, I sincerely hope not, but I couldn't see any connection between the two things.
We have Sinn Féin today calling for a referendum on the border.
A lot of people tell me they would rather be as we are and not be in a united Ireland now.
And that's Catholics as well as Protestants?
That is Catholic people as well as Protestants and just a general mix of people, and a lot of people don't want anything to do with a united Ireland. We're better off here.
It was always an ambitious notion that being part of Europe would soften Ulster's battle of identities, especially in working class communities. But the EU played an important role in supporting peace, not least with money.
A £500 bomb hidden in
Where an army base once stood on the North Belfast peace line, it built this cross-community centre.
Just going to get a wee bit of feedback from you around the room as well, so you've had an opportunity.
This class is for young people who lead summer camps for mixed groups of Catholic and Protestant children. What do you feel about what's happened?
Well, I feel it's an absolute shame. Like our whole future of young people is just, it's not going to be what it was supposed to be.
There won't be a border poll anytime soon. But in a climate of reviving nationalisms in the UK and political uncertainty, the delicate political balance here can be easily upset. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Belfast.
I'm joined now by the BBC's World Affairs editor, John Simpson. John, you reported on Britain joining what was then called the Common Market back in 1975. No one conceived back then that we would ever leave it again, did they?
Oh, no, that was it. There were people who talked darkly about a second referendum and how it had, but you see, it was such a sweeping result, 2/3 to 1/3, that it didn't really seem like an issue any longer. And Harold Wilson, who created the whole idea, craftily, as he did everything, used it to wallop everybody like Tony Benn over the head and beat them, he hoped, into silence. Didn't actually work. Referendums never work, Nick, as far as I can see. But it stayed for, 40 odd years. But it was a different world. It was a nicer world. People believed what journalists said, they believed what politicians said. Immigration didn't come into it. 41,000 people more left Britain in 1975 than they came in.
Now, we've touched on some of the internal issues on Ireland just now, on Scotland before, but what about our place in the world? To what extent is the world looking at Britain in a different way tonight from how it was just 24 hours ago?
A lot of countries are really, really worried often for themselves. I mean, Germany and France have major reasons to be nervous about their own future, their own unity, who's going to govern them and so forth. Same with Spain, only more so in some ways with Spain. America, nervous because this is the end of their 50-year concern to get Britain into Europe, so they got all their allies in one basket. Well, suddenly one's jumped out of the basket. That's not going to be playing very well in Washington. We still have some of the basic strengths. We've still got our seat on the Security Council, and we'll keep it. We're still in NATO. But there's a difference now in that there's no longer groups of countries coming together, starting to be just the opposite.
John Simpson, thank you very, very much indeed. Well, this campaign has surely given the cartoonist Gerald Scarfe some of the finest material, finest inspiration that he's had. So, Gerald, how have you been getting on?
Well, this is the Farage you saw earlier with Cameron in the beer glass, and he's saying bottoms up. And, of course, Farage was working on immigration. I mean, that was one of his main... So this one is called Fear of Turkey. He's being chased by a turkey there.
Constant huge grin on Farage's face.
Well, is it a grin or a grimace, do you think?
Well, he's seen them all off, though, hasn't he?
He's seen them all off. He's come
through.
through.
You remember Cameron called him what? They called UKIP fruitcakes.
I mean, this is Cameron looking... It's all gone pear-shaped here. I thought that was...
Yeah. So you still kept it with a smile, though, would you? What else have you
got a slightly worried smile, hasn't he? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still trying, poor guy.
Yeah.
And this, of course, is the falling pound.
What? Presumably they'd be falling out the window here if they were falling.
There's one now.
We shouldn't laugh. People getting
who's
anxious
coming
about
next?
holiday
We might wonder, you know, is Theresa May or May not.
Right. And Boris, of course, surely.
Oh, and Boris, yes.
Boris.
He's
there.
Boris. That's,
yeah.
Boris.
There.
I always draw Boris as a clown because he's told us all along he's a clown.
And he will have the last laugh?
That's the way, who knows? He looks like it, doesn't it? Although, I've got here the last one, now Humpty Dumpty has to put the whole thing together again.
Well, it's a good try. Thank you, Gerald Scarfe. That's all from this special programme. There is another special programme coming out, Question Time, this Sunday at 10:35 in Birmingham. If you want to be part of the audience, please go to the website, bbc.co.uk, Question Time. Few who voted yesterday believed that this day would come. Few in either campaign believed it. Few whose job it is to see into the future predicted it. This, though, is the day from which there can be no turning back. A day which has changed this country. We'll be living with the consequences for years to come. Good night.